Hey everybody, welcome back to Tavian's World of Reptiles. I hope you all are doing well. Today we are joined by Zuko, my Dumeral's boa. He is beautiful. Say hello, Zuko. So, we are going to continue our conversation about keeping snakes in tubs. And the topic we are going to focus on today is why breeders keep their snakes in tubs, some of the arguments people have against it, and some of the counter arguments to those arguments. Just try to help people have a better understanding as to why that is a thing that happens. So, one of the first arguments that people have when it comes to seeing snakes in tubs is that there is not enough space for the snake to move around and do its snake thing. Like there's just not enough space in the tubs and they just look so small. The counter arguments I have heard about that is one, that the tubs themselves are actually a lot larger than they seem. They're not as tall, so they look a lot smaller than they actually appear, but they actually have some depth to them, which actually allow the snakes to have a little bit of space to stretch out. Another reason people tend to keep snakes in tubs, specifically thinking about ball pythons, which are often found in like termite mounds, right? They come from very tight little holes and they stay down there most of the time unless they come up there to eat, and then they're back in these holes. And so in general, they spend 90% of their time in very tight spaces. So these tubs are actually not uncomfortable for them. And the drawers themselves are kind of like giant hides, which is why a lot of the drawers that you will see don't actually have hides in them, because the drawer system itself is supposed to act like one giant hide and give the snake a sense of security the whole entire time. So another argument is like, well, okay, what about the sense of day and night? Like, how do they get that idea that it's day and night as snakes if they're just constantly in a dark hole? Something that is often said in counter to that is that snakes are actually mostly nocturnal creatures, meaning they actually spend 90% of their time in the dark. They don't actually come out during the day too often. They don't really see daylight, so they don't really need a sense of day and light. But even with that, there are a lot of racks that actually have drawers that allow light to pass through, but it doesn't overwhelm the snakes with too much light. Okay. But that's just still not enough space. It's just not enough. Because I admit, I was one of those people that had an issue with all these snakes being kept in rack systems. I just didn't understand it. It just seemed cruel. It seemed very mill-like to me. But somebody helped me to see things clearer when they helped me to actually visualize what it was that I was asking of these breeders. Like, oh, I want these little baby snakes to have enclosures that accommodate their size. The typical rule of thumb, you know, how the snake should have an enclosure that is as long and deep as the snake is long. But, you know, these tubs, they just don't provide that. And so what somebody helped me to see is, imagine these breeders, right? So, you know, these breeders, they've got their multiple breeding pairs, and imagine they got rid of the tanks. Okay, they got rid of the racks, all right, and they got the tanks. So say, let's focus on reticulated python breeders, because retics bust out huge clutches of eggs. Okay, just big clutches of eggs. So imagine we're talking about these breeders, and they had their eggs have hatched. They got rid of their racks. Now they're doing what we're asking them to. They were providing them with what a baby snake might need, what, a 10-20 gallon tank. Let's go 20-gallon tank. Okay, so a reticulated breeder has now 30, 40 to 60 eggs that have just hatched. That's 30, 40, 60 babies that need a 20-gallon tank. Okay, now imagine this. You can see these rooms with all these little drawers, right, with these rows and rows of drawers now, but imagine a room, okay, that had walls upon walls of 20-gallon tanks, like easily 60 to 100 or more of 20-gallon tanks. That would just be insane. So much space that would be needed. And it would genuinely need so much more space than these racks, which allow the snake to have a comfortable sense of security, but also everything they need in it, but also allows for more space to be saved. Because imagine these facilities now with these rack systems, right? And they're huge, they're big sometimes. And now imagine what they would need to actually provide all these baby snakes with tanks. So they would need a much larger facility. So what you're asking is for them to now have to spend a buttload of money getting a huge facility. They now need to put a buttload of money into getting several 20-gallon tanks for each one of these babies. And now you're saying that they should have all these same things that a keeper like myself would have: decoration, substrate. They would need to have things to climb on, all that. So now they got to put a buttload of money into all the decoration, all the hides, and all this stuff for these snakes that are only going to be there for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months tops before they get sold and go to their forever homes. And guess what that means for us as the purchasers of these snakes? That means that the snakes in themselves are go up in price because of how much the breeders just had to invest to appease our need for these snakes to have these elaborate enclosures and all this need and space just for a few weeks time. So we have now push the price up on these snakes for ourselves just so that we can feel comfortable with knowing that these baby snakes have been born into a world where they get the immediate enclosure that we feel like they need. When in reality, these snakes are not actually staying with these breeders for any extended period of time. They're only there for a short period of time before they go off and go to their forever home, where they are more than likely getting something more like this, unless of course they're going to another breeder, and then of course life is going to be about the same. This is where I get a little bit like, oh, because I start thinking about those breeder snakes. Okay, like, okay, I understand the babies now. Absolutely, I couldn't imagine you guys going to have to get a huge facility for like huge tanks that for snakes that are only going to be there temporarily. Okay, okay, you don't need that. I get it. Keep the rack systems. I totally understand. But then I start thinking about the adult breeding snakes that are there year in and year out, and they are also in tubs. Now of course the tubs are significantly larger than the babies are being kept in, but they're still in tubs, and in comparison it's about the same space wise. And so I feel so bad for those particular snakes that like are there year in and year out and not actually getting more than that. But you know, I don't know. I don't know. I personally love to see, on the rarest occasion I have seen a breeder who have put their breeding pairs together and they're actually in an enclosure, like a large, normal sized enclosure. And they've just put the two snakes in there, and they've done their thing, and then they got separated back into their enclosures. And I love when I see that. It does make me sad though when I see that breeders just kind of put their breeders pair into a tub that is already, I feel, too small for the adult, and now they've got two adults in there doing their breeding thing. But of course the argument is it makes them feel more comfortable. It makes the breeding more likely to happen if they're in these conditions. And so I'm not a breeder. I don't know all that it takes to get these snakes to breed. So as much as I would love to say that I don't like to see those adult breeders in those tubs for so long and their whole adult breeding lives, I also, they're workers. You know, at the end of the day, yes, they are pets, and yes, we love them. But for these people who, you know, who do it for because they love the animals and they have passion, they're not mill keepers, but they are also, you know, they're workers. They're meant to create other animals for financial gain. And so in that case, you know, they don't get as much leisure as, you know, a snake that's not a worker. But I don't know, it's just a little thing that I personally still have a little about, but it doesn't make me look at breeders in any type of negative way as a whole. You know, it's just my own personal preference, but I don't understand all that is involved with doing that. So why they exactly do that and keep them in those conditions, like I said, mostly I've been told it's just because it makes breeding easier for them. So I can't pass too much judgment on them when this is their job. It's what they do. It's their passion. It's what they study for. It's what, and all that. So, you know, anyway, now I'm feeling like I'm starting to ramble again, as I do a lot at the end of my videos. So I think I've covered everything that I really wanted to with this one. I helped everybody to have a better understanding for why breeders keep their snakes in these rack systems. It is not to be cruel. It is not to stifle them in life. It is not to just, it is not even all just for convenience. There are various reasons for it. But anyway, you guys take care of yourselves, love your loved ones, love your reptiles, and you guys keep spreading those herbs.